Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor. Now, in recent times, having access to the most accurate valuations data and information of the whole market has never been so important. And this trend is likely to only get more important. Joining me to speak more about why data is so crucial is Simon Hunt, co-founder and CEO of Brego. Hello, Simon.
Hello, James. Good to be on.
Well, lovely to have you on, Simon. Now let's just get straight to the point then. Let's just give us an idea of Brago. How did the business start? Because I'm sure quite a few dealers might have heard of you, but there will be plenty who probably haven't.
Yeah. So it was started a number of years ago. We've been running 5 years now, but the whole business started when I was working in kind of Goldman Sachs as a contractor, basically as a developer contractor. And I was a young 22 something year old, dev on a day rate, never seen as much money as what they were paying me. So I got really excited. And I really, really wanted an Aston Martin and could not afford an Aston Martin. So that was like way, way off. So I bought what in my mind was kind of the next best thing, which was a 2013 base model Jaguar XK. So I was still, incredibly lucky and fortunate to buy this car. But I was the definition of an optimist as well, in terms of, I could like afford the asking price, but I might not have necessarily been able to afford the running cost of that thing. And so 3 years later, when it came time to sell that car, as all Jaguars have the tendency to do, it just fell off a cliff in terms of depreciation, basically. And I remember thinking to myself when I was listing on Auto Trader and seeing all of the kind of other XKs for sale, like if only I'd known how much money I was going to lose, probably would have bought a very different car. And probably just an older model because, again, being so young, I got so caught up on the detail of like, oh, I quite like the side grille going horizontally rather than vertically. So I'll buy a new one that has just stuff that doesn't matter. And yeah, so essentially the business has started on that kind of very selfish view of if I could tell how much a car was going to be in the future, then I can kind of buy smarter or make smarter buying decisions and buy better cars, basically. And then quickly realize that, the industry is also quite interested in kind of having just accurate valuations data, and then branched out. So then our first kind of client base was with the lenders. So we beachhead in the kind of supercar world, just because no one at the time was doing that as well. And so, yeah, beachhead in the supercar and like luxury car world, working with lenders there. And then kind of on that basis, branched down to mass market, being like, if we can do supercars that have very little data, coming down to mass market is then fairly straightforward because there's just so much more data to be had. So that was the idea and where it started.
No, that's very interesting. I wasn't expecting to receive that answer when I asked that question. Yeah, it's first-hand experience, isn't it? And you're approaching it from an experience you wanted a particular insight, and that's what you've gone to try and deliver. So yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting. So just explain to us where the data comes from and how does it work? And the second part to my question is, I also understand, I mean, your data is wide reaching, really, and you've got some interesting data about Kazoo and Cinch, haven't you? So just tell us a little bit more about all of that.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of how it works and where that data is coming from, so we collect kind of retail data and auction data daily from just as many places as we can kind of get our hands on that kind of data. So we break it down into three different stages in terms of how this works. So the first stage is data collection, and there's a few kind of 100,000 vehicles that we collect every day. And then the second stage on how our system works is probably the most important and took us about a year worth of development to kind of get right, which is what we call data cleansing. And it's basically the idea that the data that you collect online might not be kind of, it's kind of user entered data. So someone could easily list a Ferrari for £1 saying wanted Ferrari or something like that. And so data cleansing is about, number one, removing those outliers, and number two, just making sure that cars are put into their correct bucket. So the example we usually give, because the disparity of price is so massive, is the Ferrari F12. The same could be said for a BMW M5 versus 5 Series M Sport, but it's making sure that a Ferrari F12 is never ever seen as a Ferrari F12 Bernardetta, or sorry, the TDF is never seen as a Bernardetta, just because the price difference there is about £800,000. So if we ever bucket these two cars together, then we might have a slight issue in terms of when we go into the next stage, which is then our kind of neural network stage. And this is kind of where we differ quite a bit from all of our kind of competitors, and why we work so well in the supercar world, where there's very little data, at least. And so it's basically the traditional method of valuations is looking at kind of a historical view of a specific car. So if we take my Jaguar XK as an example, we would kind of look and see what the XK has done in the past and like draw this kind of line of best fit throughout all of the historic data. We can get to current values quite quickly from that. And then if we kind of continue this line, we might get a future valuation. There are others who kind of do more like percentage-based tables, which again works really well at mass market. But that whole method falls down quite a lot if you're valuing something like a Ferrari or any kind of new car as well. So the new Porsche Macan EV, most would struggle to value that because there's never been a Porsche Macan EV or hybrid or anything like it that Porsche has manufactured other than the Taycan. So that's kind of where that traditional method falls down. So in valuing something like a Jaguar or a Porsche Macan EV, we will, instead of looking at just the historic data of that car, we'll look at the entire market and kind of break a car down into its specific features. So we asked this neural network to compare Porsche to, Ferrari, to Volkswagen, to Mazda, to every single manufacturer, and get a picture of like why Porsches depreciate in the way they do or have the values that they do. And then come down to model levels. So we look at, the Macans, the Cayennes, the 911s, and just see where everything fits within that range. And then we come down to body styles and kind of technical specifications. So we can compare, estate cars to 4x4s to coupes, and ask this neural network to just understand like why a car has a valuation rather than just asking it what that valuation is. So it's about breaking it down into its specific features, and then understanding the valuations from those features and attributes rather than just the historic values. So what that means is when we're valuing something like a new car, even though we have no historic data on it whatsoever, we can still value it because we know exactly what Porsches do in general. We know what SUVs do. We know what electric cars do, and we know what cars that have a top speed of whatever top speed that has. We know all of these attributes, and we can compare all of these different cars and then still give a really accurate valuation to that vehicle just on the basis of using like the whole automotive market data set rather than like specific car data set.
Yes, yeah, fascinating. And like I said earlier on, I mean, this data is wide reaching, isn't it? And you've been looking at Kazoo and Cinch, haven't you? Compared to, I mean, the values that those cars are getting, the number of cars sold compared to the market average.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So in collecting all this data over kind of the last 5 years, we've just kind of done some work to do like market analytics, and then from the kind of overall market analytics, we go into dealerships. So we can kind of break down what different dealerships are doing and just analyze like all of the retail data that they're kind of working with. And so how many cars are they selling? How long is that taking to sell in terms of stock? How are they doing from a revenue perspective in terms of selling those cars? So we put all of this into a kind of big data analysis tool, and essentially come out with these results. And we thought it was quite just fascinating to see what Cinch, Kazoo, and the market average are doing. Number one, market average looks like it's zero, even though it's at kind of 26 vehicles sold. But you can kind of see how massive these like hot supermarkets essentially are, and how kind of comparatively well they're doing. But then just seeing the difference between Kazoo and Cinch is really fascinating.
That market average, I mean, is that the average used car dealer?
Exactly that, yeah. So this is an average of every single car dealer on our system, from uh, car dealers, clever car collection, all the way to the cinches and kazoos of the industry. So every single car dealer in between, that's kind of what the market average is showing there. So on average, dealers are selling kind of 26 vehicles every single month.
Hmm. Yeah, a clever car collection. Never heard of them. But interesting that you mentioned it. But yeah, our viewers can see the graph there. I think the thing that's most um interesting about that is not only is there a huge disparity between those two brands, but whilst both brands have had well documented financial problems of late, they still are selling cars though, aren't they? So it would appear as though this online selling is it's going fairly well. Would you agree?
I think I would, yeah, just in like judging entirely from data. And I guess if we kind of try and explain that, I guess looking at the average stock price could be quite an interesting comparison there, where the market average is kind of hovering between, 19, 20,000 pounds for a vehicle. But both Cinch and Kazoo are much lower, I would say, just from an average perspective. And this is obviously like across the average of the 8,000 cars they're selling.
Mhm.
Um, but maybe in having that slightly lower kind of stock, like the average stock price, maybe they're selling just more cars from kind of undercutting the market there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Offering cars at slightly lower prices to draw in the customer. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Very interesting that. Well, let's talk about EVs because, of course, that is an absolutely enormous topic, particularly in the used car industry at the moment. How might the trend that we're seeing in the EV average price, how do you think that's going to impact the market?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one. So this is obviously, I think from, December 22 onwards is kind of the downfall of like what we saw in the EV residual, like just in the used market, basically. So all these used cars kind of having a price adjustment and just coming down in value. But if you compare it to, the petrol, even the hybrids, petrol and diesel, it's a massive price adjustment. It's not just this kind of small, again, this is market average. So this is every single car averaged up in this kind of fuel type across all of the months. So having this huge line of from £40,000 nearly down to below 30,000. And this includes or will include some of the new cars as well that have been listed. So that's, yeah, a massive price adjustment. And I think that will probably in some ways open up the EV market to some of more mass buyers. But in other ways, again, just looking at that data, you can still see there's a huge premium on the average price of an EV versus a hybrid or a petrol, which is, yeah, interesting, and I guess begs the question of will people be buying some of these used EVs as well,
Mhm.
or are we going to see further price adjustments down the road, especially this year?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we know the reasons why that there's been this huge realignment. Just picking two of the most obvious ones, obviously Tesla, this time last year, Tesla made a dramatic cut in their new car prices. And of course, a lot of these new EVs are filtering into the used market. I know you sort of hinted at it there, but I mean, it's pretty likely that this is going to sort of perhaps sort of level out a little bit, but the average prices of used EVs are probably going to continue falling a little bit this year. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I would, and it will be more interesting towards the end of the year when we kind of start to see these manufacturers work out how many EVs they've sold and whether they're going to meet the mandate. If I guess the current kind of predictions that we've been seeing is that dealers might register these cars to kind of boost the idea of sales, which would then cause some issues basically in terms of the residual values of these. Like if car buyers then start to see these essentially new cars as used cars, even though they've done, manufacturer mileage, that could have a pretty significant impact on residual values for all of the EVs. And we could see like another drop in price again. But I think in order for the like mandate to be successful, that is kind of what might need to happen, even though it's not necessarily the best case scenario for these vehicles in terms of residual values.
Hmm. Just taking a look at that slide about the number of vehicles, the fuel types, the number of vehicles sold, it would appear that electric and hybrids are very, very steady compared to huge fluctuations between petrol and diesel. Have you got any observations on why that might be happening, and do you think that's likely to continue?
Yeah, it's a good point. There are some kind of significant dips, especially I think this will primarily be used car. So this will be mostly used car market. So we might see like there's a dip in both of the Septembers there. That might be because more people are buying new cars in September, and so used car market takes a back seat. But there is also just huge fluctuations in both petrol and diesel. I suspect we'll see diesel kind of drop off over the next few years just from like everything the government is doing against the diesel cars. I suspect we will kind of see the difference between petrol and diesel, which at the moment they're quite parallel. But I expect to see that difference kind of fall off, and petrol to kind of win that war almost. But then, yeah, we are expecting to see EVs and hybrids kind of boost up, and you can kind of see it in January 2024 there, like what we expect to be the start of this kind of boost. But it's difficult to see how they might catch up to petrol cars at the moment over at just under 300,000 cars sold. Is tricky to see how we're going to kind of level those two.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's some fascinating data on those slides there. I mean, just can you just explain how well the difference between Brego and other valuation and data providers?
Yeah. So we touched on it earlier, just in terms of, I guess, how we work in the data that we're working with. So there are those who will kind of work more with auction data and be a trade up style of valuation, which does work fairly well if you're kind of a trade, like in the trade and kind of buying from that. We're a retail down approach and kind of believe that like that is the best approach, just we're kind of valuing them from a consumer point of view, and consumers are the ones who are almost assigning these values, being they're the ones purchasing these vehicles. So a retail down approach just kind of makes sense. And then we are predominantly kind of retail data heavy as well, collecting from kind of the dealers that we work with and the lenders that we work with, working with those dealers. And so it's a very like retail down approach, but also just I think the primary difference is just in how we work with that data. So rather than just looking at, again, that's kind of specific vehicle data, we're just opening it up so that if we've got a brand new car that's not like only been on sale in the last year, rather than just a year's worth of data, we've got 20 years worth of historic data that we can kind of pull against and bring all of these attributes together. So I'd say that's like the primary difference between us and the other valuation providers.
Hmm. Lastly, Simon, for dealers using the platform, I mean, what other data can they expect to come across?
Yeah, so we've kind of sampled it in this session for sure, where we kind of have pretended to be a Cintra or Kazoo, and we're kind of comparing ourselves to our competitors, essentially being those two are probably the closest competitors to one another. So as a dealer on our platform, you can just go in and essentially compare your own dealership to any one of your competitors, or just any dealer in the entire UK. And you can kind of just see, how you are performing compared to your other dealers, and then we can kind of recommend vehicles to you that would be good to sell. So we kind of judge it based on your area, and we can just say like in your area, these are the vehicles that are selling really well, have a small kind of days to sell, but high desirability score. And again, it's just comparing that 20 years worth of data that we've managed to collect over the last kind of 5 years, and just kind of throwing that all together, doing some extremely clever analysis on it, and then just giving that to the dealers. So the dealer kind of comparison tool is bundled in with our valuation tool, and then we also have that like real-time market update. So kind of market analytics, where we can say exactly where the market's going and kind of predict on future trends and everything like that. And all packaged into this like new dealer platform that we've got.
Brilliant. And lastly, I mean, anyone listening to this, I mean, if they want to find out any more information, I mean, where should they go?
Yeah, so best to probably visit our website, which is brego.io, and get in touch from there. And lots of information, but then loads of friendly people within the company to reach out to as well. We love chatting about cars because absolutely all of us love cars and love this industry. Yeah, so yeah, happy to chat to anyone, but just reach out through our website.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks very much for giving up your time today, Simon.
Thank you, James.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye bye.